Today we will be talking about effective officer transitions for your organization. During this module, we will talk about the importance of an effective transition, establish a clear plan for organizational transition, and provide practical tools for a smooth transition. In student involvement and leadership, also known as SIL, we have competencies. There are 5 competencies that our office uses. These 3 that you see on your screen are the 3 that most align with today's workshop: collaboration, innovation, and curiosity. Collaboration helps you figure out effective communication skills that are appropriate to the situation, and we want you to collaborate with everyone in your organization to think about transitions. Innovation provides an opportunity for you to think about how to be innovative in the way you want to scale and grow your organization. And curiosity just allows you to think a little deeper about what are ways we can improve our organization during this transitional period. Before we get started with this module, take a moment to think about your experience with other organizations. What are some approaches you've seen to officer transitions? What has worked and what were some areas of improvement? So we're going to talk about why transitions matter. Let's start with continuity of leadership and vision. Outgoing officers should have a deep understanding of the organization's culture, values, and vision. Effective transitions can ensure that the new leaders continue to uphold the group's mission and build upon past achievements. But without continuity, the organization risks losing its direction and long-term focus. We want to make sure that the leadership and the vision stays consistent so everyone involved feels like they have a stake in the organization. Retention of institutional knowledge is also really important because key knowledge such as processes, context, lessons learned can easily be lost if not carefully handed over to the incoming officers. Institutional knowledge can also be relationships with partners, event planning timelines, budget processes, organizational guidelines, bylaws, constitutions, regulations, whatever your organization has. When transitions are smooth, the new officers have a stronger foundation and they don't need to reinvent the wheel. Strong organizational culture helps the outgoing officers embody the values and sets the tone that can be passed down to the new officers. Good transitions contribute to a supportive, cohesive environment where each generation of leaders feel a part of that shared journey. Preserving culture helps incoming officers feel welcome, making it easier for them to build trust with their team and members of the organization. And so, because we want them to be welcomed and make it easier for them to build trust, the efficiency is critical in that process, right? Thinking about all the time that incoming officers could waste just trying to figure out what they need to be doing. But if you have a good transition, the efficiency goes up exponentially. So a good transition process gives new officers a clear roadmap, helping them quickly adapt and become productive. Essentially, they get to hit the ground running as soon as their term starts. They spend less time learning logistics and more time focusing on strategic growth and new initiative and goals. Incoming officers with a solid start are less likely to feel overwhelmed, enhancing both their effectiveness and satisfaction in the role, decreasing the likelihood of them wanting to step away from their role due to stress. So here are some different approaches to transitions. There's the independent approach, and that really looks like when an incoming officer really reviews officer expectation and responsibilities individually or on their own and discuss it with the outgoing officer. There's not a lot of shadowing. There's not a lot of conversation. They really are just by themselves learning the role and asking questions if they need to. There's a learning contract which is developed between the incoming and the outgoing officers. And it kind of pre-establishes a list of skills and tasks that incoming officers must satisfy to be eligible to run/hold for a specific office in the organization. So think about the constitution of your organization and how people will apply or run for that role. That is really what a learning contract tends to be. And when they get elected, there's some things that some organizations might require them to do in order to get their role fully turned over to them. That's really what a learning contract looks like. Shadowing and mentoring is probably the most common. Incoming officers are paired with an outgoing officer for a specific period of time to learn their position. They have discussion and interaction where outgoing officers will share their expertise, their insight, and advice for the incoming officer. Through a shadowing process, the new officers are elected and serve as an elect. So think about the president-elect or the secretary-elect with the current officer to learn that process, meet the people, and transition and get the transition materials. Retreats and workshops are another approach to transitions. They can take different formats, right? But retreats and workshops provide an opportunity for incoming and outgoing officers to transition materials and discuss pertinent issues. All retreats and workshops should be planned in advance and should seek to address specific goals and objectives of your organization. Your approach to transition can be a mix of all of these things, or could just be one, but it should be an intentional approach that works to set up the incoming officers for success, which in turn will leave an organization to start the next term on a good foot, right? So as a new organization, independent might not be the best approach, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. You might need to do a retreat or a workshop, some shadowing and mentoring. That might be the best approach for you, but whatever that approach looks like for your new organization, just ensure that it's an intentional approach that is really thinking about setting up the incoming officers to be successful so your organization can continue to grow and continue to reach their goals. Some components of a smooth transition include knowledge transfer, skill development, and relationship building. Knowledge transfer is essentially when the outgoing officers share documents, templates, contacts, passwords, relevant procedures, all of the things. So they just are essentially transferring the knowledge that they have in their head. It matters because it minimizes the learning curve for the incoming officers and provides a strong foundation for the organization's continuity. Skill development is also really important depending on the organization that you are. For some organizations, their officers have to have a skill that is required or is necessary for them to learn in order to be successful in their role. So think about an engineering organization who actually has a task to do some engineering. It's really important that those people learn that skill. So they may want to arrange training sessions and workshops if possible, because that builds competency early for incoming officers and they are able to feel capable and equipped to lead effectively from the start. Relationship building is also really important because it introduces incoming officers to their key contacts, their stakeholders for their organization, and that could include the university staff, partners, admins, sponsors, alumni. Relationship building fosters trust, which is essential for collaboration and helps with incoming officers feel confident and engaging with stakeholders. So typically there's a transition timeline that you want to keep in mind. Phase 1 preparation starts about 1 or 2 months before a term ends. And you really just want to ensure the materials are organized for a smooth handover and incoming officers have a comprehensive resource. So you want to make sure all that's in one space, one place, so that incoming officers know exactly where they need to go to get that information. That's when you want to do that, preparing. Phase 2 may look like shadowing training. That comes typically within the last month of the outgoing officer's term. They want to really hone in on that shadowing, that training piece. They want to really have those conversations. Phase 3 is the handover meeting. That's the end of your term. Whenever your term ends and that new officer's term begins, that's your handover meeting. And you want to formally hand over all of the transition materials that you have created. And you want to make sure that's all there. You want to ensure that all high priority topics are covered and incoming officers feel prepared for their responsibilities. Phase 4 is for the first month of an incoming officer's term. You want to ensure that you provide support. There's a support system, that empowers the incoming officers while encouraging their independence. And the last phase really comes at the end of the first month of the new role for an incoming officer. The incoming officer is going to make sure they create some feedback loops that strengthens the organization's transition practices for future leaders. So considering your transition as an incoming officer, what went well during this transition period for you? What would you've done differently? What questions do you still have? You want to write those down, and that's going to be your evaluation and your feedback loop as you now are incoming officer or an officer, who has the reins, and you want to make sure the next time when you hand over the baton, you have some of that prepared and ready for those next leaders. Communication and conflict resolution tips. During a transition period, it can be very stressful depending on when you transition, whether you transition at the end of December for calendar year, organizations that operate on a calendar year, and if your organization operates on an academic year, it can be stressful. So you want to make sure that the communication is clear, open, and concise. You want to make sure you schedule meetings so there's no pop-ups and everyone has an opportunity to be intentional about their updates, their questions, and their feedback. Active listening is going to be critical. Incoming officers should feel free and supported to ask clarification while outgoing officers should listen without judgment. This helps avoid any misunderstandings and ensure that everyone's on the same page throughout the transition. Encouraging feedback loops, like I said before in the last slide, feedback allows both officers to improve on the handover process, and it encourages incoming officers to express their learning needs and areas of support. And lastly, because it can be a stressful time period, it doesn't have to, but it can be, handling disagreements constructively is going to be the approach you want. So approach discussions with focus on collaboration. Frame disagreements as differences in approaches rather than conflicts. Outgoing officers can share the why behind their methods and give incoming officers context to decide if they want to adopt or modify those practices. Constructive conflict resolution builds professional working relationships, and it fosters trust and equips new officers with problem-solving skills so they can push forward their organization's mission and do that in a constructive way. As you consider your transition as a new organization, you're going to need to start building up your toolbox for transition. So some transition documents that you want to make sure that is in that toolbox as you think about your approach to transitions. These are some of the things that you should really consider having in that toolbox. Your mission and vision statement, that should be present and available for your incoming officers so they never lose sight of what the mission and the vision of the organization is. An updated constitution and bylaws. You don't necessarily need to change your bylaws or constitution every year, but it's always good to take a look at it. And should there be a need to make any amendments, that can be on your transition to-do list for your incoming officers, or at least for them to look at it. Always pass down relevant contacts, people who you've worked with throughout the year, those who were helpful in garnering you to become a new organization, your support. You definitely want to make sure you hand down your advisor contact. If that changes, you want to make sure you have the right email, right location of their office, and their name. Passwords. As you become a new organization, you're gonna probably create a lot of profiles, whether that be social media, software, anything of the sort. You want to make sure your passwords are all in one place, so the new organization's officers have an opportunity to have those passwords on ready, and they don't have to communicate back and forth at wee hours of the night to figure out something should they be working on organizational business. Position descriptions can typically be found in a constitution, but a good practice is to have them on hand, just so everyone's aware of who has the responsibility to do what. Your agenda and your meeting minutes are also good to hand down so they can see what was discussed, when it was discussed. Keeping a good record of your organization's business is always a really good practice. The goals and objectives, event summaries. Event summaries are just a summary of an event that you've done. So you want to think about all the questions: what went well, what were some areas of improvement, who did we work with, what was the budget we spent. That's really helpful for your incoming officers. Budget information, copy of newsletters and emails, any recruitment information that you use, the calendar that you've used to plan out your time, and any contracts that your organization may sign. You may want to think about some other things that may be specific to your organization, but these are just some good ways to start as you think about building that transition toolbox. As we wrap up, we want to give you a moment to reflect on this module. Just take a moment to think about your takeaways from today's module and how you want to implement some of these approaches as you think about your transition period that will come up as you look ahead. That is this module. We will see you in the next module. Should you have any questions, feel free to email us at leadership@duke.edu if you have questions about transitions.